I know that we have to have it all done by September 17th, right?
Right.
So if I watch part of it, do I get credit for watching what I missed?
Yes. And when I say that they'll be together, the first session will be one single video.
Okay.
And then the second one is its own video. I'm just putting them right there together in case you couldn't make them both. But then it's less click here, click here, click here. So that first session is here. The second one, obviously watch the one that you didn't, but then they're both there for reference if you need to come back to it later.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. All right, let's see, what are our words? Overwhelmed, clueless, warm. Jessica, you're warm. Mixed, exhausted, right there. Yep. Right there with you guys. Okay. Let me make sure. Nobody's hearing an echo, correct?
No echo.
Good. Okay, so we're recording. I'm going to go ahead and get this rolling. Please keep an eye on the chat. If you can answer questions in there, feel free to answer each other's questions. It is a smaller session, so go ahead and unmute yourself if you want to pop in. Since we are recording, I should have given you that as a heads up. Feel free to turn your cameras off. It doesn't bother me one way or the other. I actually did comb and flat iron my hair today. First time in 5 months.
I was thinking how nice your hair looked the very first video I watched. First session. It looked good.
I did flat iron it. But now that I can actually like move my shoulder, hey.
Right. Yeah.
Business. So this one is all focused on Google Classroom's calendar, which for our students is probably not like the big win for them. But what I found in the spring was a lot of it was the parents at home helping and understanding what's done, what's not done, what needs to be done. And it really made me start thinking about using the calendar in a way that works really well, as opposed to using the calendar. Middle school and high school, the calendar is geared a lot in part towards the students' use of it. For Google Classroom, obviously there's a student aspect to it, and I am super excited. Google Classroom just released a brand new update that I think will make a lot of this seamless. There will need to be on your part a little bit extra instruction to get them used to this, but it's new for everybody. And it's a part of the homepage on Google Classroom. We'll talk about it in a second. But if you weren't aware, in Google Classroom, and each time you make a Google Classroom, it automatically creates a Google Calendar right there with it. You don't need to create one. It's there. It exists. You can actually take it. It's a part of your account as well. You could share that particular calendar to parents if you wanted to. You could post a link to it for quick access in an email to parents if you would like to. And then anything that you create within your classroom and give it a date, because that's what puts it on a calendar, right? The parents would then be able to see it. Now, in all honesty, the parents aren't going to go to the calendar unless you make sure that they know that the calendar is there and available and it works for them. And like I said, at our elementary level, you have to kind of judge your parents and gauge, is this worthwhile? I'm going to show you a different way for our students that involves the calendar, but is a little bit simpler. Everybody with me? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Please do not, I love Google Calendar. It's like my best friend 90% of the time. I have a great deal of many calendars.
Whoa, you do like it.
Okay. It makes a lot of sense to my brain. Okay, so ignore this, but please know like the colors, and you see I have little emojis in there. It's very quick and easy reference. I have shared my home calendar with my school calendar so that it all lays on top of each other. So don't stress about any of this. But over here to the left, do you see that I have some calendars checked and some unchecked?
Mm-hmm.
So you can see like this one right here is a Google Classroom calendar. I have it unchecked. It's a matter of checking it and unchecking it. You can also go on your Skinny Snowman and you can hide it. And then you don't actually see it there anymore. You didn't delete it. It's just not showing. Okay, so that's one place where if you're a heavy Google Calendar user like myself, you may choose to hide it from your list. Okay, so that's one area that you might want to check out. And you can see some of them are it's whatever you name your Google Classroom is what it's going to pull over onto your Google Calendar. And I truly am not the primary teacher in a lot of these. I was a co-teacher. So the co-teacher also has that ability, and notice that that gives me all of the abilities, just like the regular teacher. So when you add in a co-teacher, they can also be adding items in on the calendar. Okay, so I know that's kind of overwhelming, so I'm going to get out of there. Now, I'm going to go back to my classes page. And we're starting a brand new fresh year, right? So this is my school account. You can see I've got 7 tiles, which means I have 7 calendars that are attached to this, to Google Classroom. Now, if you haven't already, please make sure that you archive your old Google classes. But you can see that the one that I just hid from the list isn't showing here. That classroom is not active, but the calendar still is. So that's why I hid it. Now here's a classroom that I set up for this coming week. Look right above it. This is the brand new piece that I was referring to. I think you guys are going to love this. And I think you will go a long way in helping your students understanding this feature right here alone.
I don't have a to-do on mine as I have it pulled up, Sarah.
It might be still slowly rolling out, but it will, their rollouts are no more than like 2 weeks. So if you don't, I just noticed this in my account, I think like 2 or 3 days ago.
Okay, thank you.
So keep in mind, you're going to have to explicitly teach this to the kids. You're going to have to really focus them in and say, hey, this is this purpose, right? So this to-do list, if they click on this, it takes them to this new screen. And look how wonderful this is, you guys. This is the stuff that's assigned. These all have no due dates. So these are assignments that I've not attached any kind of a due date to. Or if I'm a student in these classes, there's no due date associated with it. And when you scroll down, do you see these options that I have down here? This week, what's due next week, and what's due even later than next week. So think about if all of these had some sort of due date associated with them. Think how clean this is going to be for your kids. It's not going to be, well, I don't know what's due this week. I don't know what to have to get done, or what can I time management wise. And I know that's a very odd term to be talking about with our little ones, but think about their parents at home. If we do have to go remote, or if they are home for 2 days being sick, you know, what do I have to do with my kid? Okay, I want you to go into Google Classroom. I want you to click on the to-do list, and I want you to pull up this week. I mean, right now I have nothing in my this week. But
That's
this,
awesome.
isn't it?
I know when, you know, back in the spring when we had to do this, I know our grade level would kind of push out a message, hey, you know, make sure your child's turned in all their work. It's all, you know, due by tomorrow. And then you'd get a flood of, I can't remember if they turned it in or not, you know, and so it was just such a hassle. So this is awesome.
Yeah, this is great. My question is, so let's say you assign a question.
Yep.
It's not an assignment. Does that still pop up as a to-do as long as I put a due date on it?
Well, do you see this one down here? This is a question. It has no due date associated with it. And you can see it was posted back in February of 2017.
What?
It was a Google Classroom. It was in a Google Classroom that I went to a training.
Okay.
Nice.
This
So it
is
doesn't
I'm
matter what-
wondering if like it gets put off your to-do list if you actually respond, or does the teacher have to assign, like, how does it get off your list?
So if I do this, how are you doing? I'll just go ahead and respond to this one pretty good. Oops.
Great.
With that little guy. And then over here, I guess I should put it here.
Yeah.
And then I click turn in. Give it a second. Now I'm going to go back. Now look over here. When I open up classes, these are the classes that I'm a teacher in. And then these are the classes that I'm enrolled in. So your students will see this. Here's that to do as well.
Okay.
I go back here and
Gonzo.
it's gone. So
So
they
it would
did.
be under done.
Yeah, and see these two other tabs? This is the key one right here, guys. This is the one where I'm like, thank you, because this is all my missing work. Wow, these are back in 2014.
So it throws it to missing when the due date is passed and it's not been submitted.
Mm-hmm.
Hey,
Nice.
Sarah, what happens? So, I did a trial with my title classroom last year, and I would assign, I would put assignments to where they would post at a later date.
Right?
Does that make sense? So
Yeah.
then they would not show up on the assign to the parents until that date. So they wouldn't have this crazy long, overwhelming list. Is that accurate? And so
Correct.
then say I let them post on Sunday, they would pop up on there, and then if I do not put a due date, then they don't ever go to missing. Is that correct? So they'll never go to missing if there's not a due date.
Well, let's look and see if this one. So and this is the numbering system that I had referred to in the organizing your course. Do you see how, like, if I were to say, okay, Mandy, I noticed that you don't have number 4 completed. You come to this list. Oh, there's number 4. Okay, I'm going to click on this. But you wanted to see if there's no due date, if it shows up on missing, right? So
Yes. So they may not just be able to check missing assignments if we didn't assign a due date. If it's just right, they may have to look at, oh, it was assigned and I still don't have it finished. So
Well,
we
because
need to assign due dates probably.
yeah, because the idea behind it's missing is it's past when it should have been turned in. Not that it's just not done. It's not done, you haven't done it. But it's missing, the date has passed, you're late. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
And then this third tab, again, as a parent, Dewana, like you mentioned, I don't know if it's done or not. It grays out the assignment if you've completed it, but I don't feel like it's like necessarily like an in your face, like, look at me, I'm done. So they can just come to this done list. And I've turned these 3 in that have no due date to them. These were done early. This was done this week. This was done last week. And then see how that's a blue hyperlink? I guess if you're looking at it, it's telling you, you can drop down these. Obviously those don't have any. But you see how it allows you to focus in on each of those chunks. When I saw this, I was like, oh, thank you. This is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where I say for our students, keeping in mind K4, it's not so much the calendar, even though that totally wraps into all of this. It's teaching them this whole to-do piece. And then as the teacher, this is your side of it. This is the to-do list. This is your to review list. So as the teacher, this gives you as the teacher, what do you need to review? And you see, again, it's the 2 tabs to review, and these are things that you already have reviewed. and you have your statistics just like you would when you're inside of Google Classroom. And here it's layering in. So if you're a teacher that has decided to have 3 different classes, you can choose that you only want to look at one particular class, or you look at all of them. You know, these here again, no due date. You've got all of these, or you can close that and you have these that are a work in progress. So these are things that still need to be reviewed. And you can see I have a student that's turned this in. It was only assigned to 1 student, but nothing has been graded. And these are all hyperlinks. So it kind of becomes like your interactive gradebook section, who's turned stuff in, who's not turned it in, but allows you to layer them all on top of each other.
That's life-changing right there.
Don't you, like, I just saw this and I was like, it's about time.
Yeah, it's going to be great.
And again, thinking about if you're a self-contained teacher, you have multiple things. And if you're a teacher that repeats, and I don't think anybody's doing that this year, but if you have like this group of kids, that group of kids, that group of kids, it brings it all together for you, the teacher. But it does the same for the kids. And that's the cool part. Now, I will also say, bottom left-hand corner, this little question mark, if you've never noticed this, because I mentioned this in the last, the course organization, the one very common request that I get is, how do I see this from a student perspective? Classroom does not provide that, not in a nice, clean, easy, from the teacher's seat way to do it. So I'm creating generic students for each grade level in each building. So there'll be a 1st grade generic student for Elda and a 1st grade generic student for Morgan. You can add those students to your classrooms, and then you can see the student view that way. But what I would love to see is if we all use this little question mark down here, there's a report issue or request feature. If you could click on that and then ask them to, teachers need a student view. I need to be able to see what my students see. And I don't want to have a fake student in there, because as I remind teachers, I give you a fake student, please know they're not going to do any work. You know, so then you always have that one extra. And you have to remember, like, oh, that's not an absent kid. That's my fake kid. It would be really nice if we could all request that feature of teachers need a student view. And I know a lot of times you go, well, nobody's listening, nobody's listening. Yeah, Google absolutely listens. Through my Google trainer thread, we all the time get heads up like, hey, this is coming out. It's a direct result of teachers asking for this. So keep those requests coming. And obviously, if you're the annoying, tapper and you keep doing it like every day, Google's going to hear that over and over and over and over and over and over again. Keep that in mind too. So I just wanted to give that a plug. If there's other ideas that you have, share it with them. They do listen, honest and truly. Now, the third part up here for as a teacher, keep in mind the kids are not going to see this to review, because that's for the teachers. They won't see that, so don't worry about that part. But each class, like I said, has a calendar. You could also go into calendar in Google Classroom. So it's not that wild and crazy tab that I was showing you, like in my calendar. But here it's only going to be your Google Classroom calendars. And again, you can select. I'm not sure I understand. Sorry, my watch. You can pick just a particular class if you have more than one that you're a part of. So if you just want to see this practice class, and then you can toggle through to see dates. It literally is just a very simple calendar. So let's see if I have this one, but I'd have to go way back in time. You could sit here and do that. You can't just type stuff in. You'd have to go week by week. But if you had items attached to due dates, they could show up here too. I think for the older students, 3rd, maybe 4th grade, maybe you'd have some success with the kids looking at this. I really like that to-do list a whole lot better. with the assigned, the missing, and then the done. I feel like that's just a cleaner piece for the kids. It makes a lot more sense. This is the stuff that's assigned to me. This is the stuff that's missing. This is the stuff that is done.
Sarah, if you're assigning due dates through Google Classroom and this calendar is synced to it, is it just going to automatically put those assignments in there? Okay.
Yep. And I know, like, we have to shift our thinking a little bit on this. I understand for a lot of things, it seems silly to give items due dates. But back in the spring, when it was that, okay, now you have until May 15th to get stuff done. It was a date. It was an end. It was, this is the last, right? You as the teacher, if you put those dates on there, it tells the kids like, hey, I have something to do. And I think about it in this respect. You, the teacher, I hand you this piece of paper and I say, here you go. Here's the assignment. Mrs. Kiefer, when's this due? I'm not putting a due date on it. Mrs. Kiefer, how many points is this worth? I'm not grading it. What does that tell me as the student if there's no due date and there's no point value attached to it?
It's not worthwhile.
She's not going to look at it. She's not going to grade it. So out of everything else that I have to do, why would I do this? But on the other hand, if my teacher hands me a paper and says, this is due in a week and it's worth 5 points, well, I should probably do it by next week, right? So it's almost like what I like to think of a Jedi mind trick for the kids. But then I'm also thinking for the parents at home. I've got 3 girls. A lot of you have your own kids at home too. If they were given a lot of stuff in the spring that had no due date to them and no point value attached to them, it was kind of hard to get them to actually do something. And that's where having those due dates, it also provides like that learning pathway. I should do this before I do that one that's due in 2 weeks. This one's due tomorrow. That one's due. And guys, this is going to be a year of who knows? You know, that kid may not come back for 2 weeks. They're at home. Mom's trying to help them, or big brother's trying to help them, or something. If we put due dates on stuff, it gives them that chronological order to follow. If we put point values to things, it lets them know like, hey, I as a teacher am going to do something with it. And guys, like when I taught 7th and 8th grade, sometimes it was a point, 2 points. It wasn't going to sway their grade, but it let them know that this was important to me. And again, that's something that you have to kind of balance as a teacher.
I think for us, because in elementary, I give something and you do it right now. Like it's due now, today. But for those students who could be absent for 2 weeks, I think this is more for them than it is for what's currently going on in my classroom. And I guess I'm kind of getting the impression, from, Becky's video and, these trainings that even though I'm in class, I'm more or less teaching remote. Like my kids are going to be face to face, but it's seeming more and more that the expectation is everything is going to be through this platform. Is that right or wrong?
And Trish, I think we will help ourselves out a lot if we start with that mindset, because in large part, they could be out for the flu for 3, 4, 5 days. We've experienced that. If we go ahead and we get that rolling with our students now, whether they're out for strep for 2 days, they're out because of COVID for 14 days, they're out for a day for a funeral, putting dates on things, housing them all right here. Think about the ease of it for your parents. Again, you can't force them to do it. Like you couldn't force them to do paper stuff either.
Right.
But it's here, it's available. It becomes that single location for everything to live.
I think something we need to remember too as teachers is just because the student is out for a long period of time doesn't mean they are well enough to do all of this work. So I don't want to lose track of that. You know what I mean? Because some of them will be sick, and
And some of
I
them,
don't,
they may have just to stay home because it's in their house.
right.
Right.
So
And then they
that's
can do it.
perfectly healthy to do their work. So I think it can go both
Absolutely.
ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more, so I think that knowing that circumstance and they could be the one with COVID and not have the symptoms, you know what I mean? And they just test it and they're fully capable, but then they could be really sick and not able to do it. So I think that's going to be a hard thing to judge is for me personally, like what all to expect to them to turn in.
But I feel like that we've been given the grace to understand that for kids and to have their expectations reflect that grace. Typically if you're out for 14 days, you get 14 days to put your work back in. And if you need, I feel like that's been communicated to us that we can do what works best for us and the family.
Absolutely. And that's where I can show you guys how to do these different things and I can show you maybe better practices, but you guys know your kids, you guys know your parents, you guys know the situations far better than I'll ever be able to. So you do have to kind of work within
The last online one.
what works. And Jessica, you have a question in the chat, which is great. Can you make different due dates for different kids? Unfortunately, the only way to do that is if you create different assignments for different kids. So if you have, you know that these 3 kids are going to be out and you want to adjust that date for them, make an entirely separate assignment just for those 3 kids. And if you don't know how to assign it specifically to those kids, join me on Friday. I believe it's 9:00. Could be the 10:30. I'm pretty sure it's 9:00. Join me. We'll be back and we'll talk about it. Do you like how I'm trying to sell that? Otherwise, I'll record it and you can watch me later. It's all good. Or call me, text me. You guys know.
Are you straightening your hair for that one too? I'm just kidding.
I don't know. It's usually pretty curly, but if it's a 9:00, yeah. Because I'll shower the night before instead of doing something, working out in the morning. Straight Sarah. Serious Sarah. Just kidding. That doesn't work for me. Other questions? It's 12:31. We planned this one to be pretty short, sweet, to the point. So if nobody has any questions, I'll go ahead, stop the recording. If you have questions that don't involve Google Classroom, but you want to try to tackle them now, feel free to stay on. It takes me a few minutes.